All right, and we are live. What's up, everybody? If you're checking this out later on demand, I appreciate you tuning in. We've got episode 7 of Press Pause. I'm Jeff, the host. Obviously, there's no one else around. Yeah, it's going to be a short and sweet one this week. Not a ton of news, a lot of really interesting stories, I think, but nothing like just not a ton of it, right? But I think we're definitely seeing some interesting moves this week along the lines of consolidation. Um, Before we get into it, though, I've got no, it's over here. I'll never get that right, but I've got Octopath Traveler 2 going over here. Been playing a little bit of that this week. Just like the first one, it's one of those games I know it's going to take me like all year to beat. It's a very long game. I've heard anywhere from like 70 to 100 hours. I'm getting into like the chapter 2 for characters. So I've got a long ways to go, but if it's like the first one, it's going to take me a long time. I usually play it in stints. Like I'll do a couple, 2 to 3 chapters for some characters, and then I kind of take a break, get distracted by other things. It's such a long game, and I think that the way they do the storytelling, very anthology story like vibes, it makes it easy to sort of compartmentalize and sort of do it like chapters at a time, just sort of play for a weekend for a little bit or a night and then put it away for a minute. But loving the game. It's gorgeous, super cool. I think it really took the formula of the first one and improved on it like in every way. So the rumors are true. Octopath Traveler 2 is incredible. Other than that, played some more X Defiant. Very interesting. I feel like, at first I was trying to like get used to it again, and I went back to COD for a bit and then went to X Defiant to kind of see the speed difference, and definitely some differences in like TTK, some differences in movement. I don't know. X Defiant felt good. Like it feels quick. Movement's nice. Really started to kind of get the flow. Interested to see how just like a normal round of Slayer or like Deathmatch works, as opposed to the sort of team-based objective modes that have been in the demo. But yeah, I'm excited to try that one out. I'm free to play. It should be fairly easy to get my friends to download that game and for us to all give it a try one weekend. And I think it could be one that goes into rotation. It feels like old school COD, but with some modern touches. Very enjoyable there. On top of that, also been playing Evil West on PC. The new PC has really kind of screwed me over for games. I've been like just bouncing game to game the last couple of weeks. And that's continued. So also played some Evil West. Digging it. I can't believe I slept on it. Focus and also Flying Wild Hog, both the publisher and developer respectively, they just get more and more of my respect each title I play. I kind of slept on this game because it was getting sort of middling reviews, and I was like, I'll wait for a sale. And maybe that's affecting it because I got it for like $30 on Steam, and maybe that's affecting my enjoyment as like, the less price, but I don't think so. It's plays like an old school kind of 360 beat 'em up title. And weirdly enough, it kind of reminds me in a lot of ways of like God of War, with the way you go into combat, the way you unlock abilities, the way you sort of string them together, the way it's sort of this mix of like melee and range, but you're kind of limited in like ammo and range and timing. Yeah, it's a pretty fun game though. I'm having a blast there. That might end up being the video for next week. Who knows what I'm going to be playing next week. Like I said, I bounce around a lot. It's kind of a problem, but let's get into the news. Let's jump into the news this week. Like I said, a lot of consolidation, a lot of acquisitions going on. Up first, we'll jump over here. We've got Sega to buy Angry Birds maker Rovio for $776 million. This was getting reported as a rumor like a week ago or so. I think last Friday, that Sega was going to be spending $1 billion for this, and they sort of came out and said, "Hey, we're not sure there, right? Like we're in talks, we're not ready to make a move." But they very quickly came out with this report. This is from Axios, but talking about the purchase from Sega, picking up Rovio, mobile game maker who also has a platform, which I think this is an interesting part of it. They also have a platform for helping mobile games sort of stand up, and start monetizing, right? So like an easy platform to stand your game up, ready for release on iOS and Android, and then an easy way to start monetizing it. So this puts Sega in a good position, I think, with like in the mobile market. I think there's a lot of room for tie-ins, right? Like we've seen them start to do like some JRPG stuff on mobile. I'm sure we're gonna see Sega games come to mobile. It'd be interesting to see if they do anything with like Football Manager, things like that, moving into the mobile space. I think this also sort of hopefully puts more of a nail in the coffin of everyone. The last year or so, I've heard a lot of talk on like Twitter and stuff, and like in Reddit, like of who's gonna buy Sega. Sega's gonna get acquired. I think this is showing Sega's maybe looking to make a run of it and stay independent. I think it would be really hard for one of the bigger companies to purchase Sega, not for the price, but because of the baggage that comes with Sega. Sega is has a parent company that's a holding corporation called Sega Sammy Holdings. And that venture is not just Sega Entertainment, but also includes like pachinko machines, resorts. So there's like a gambling element tied up with Sega that I think for a lot of the bigger companies, like especially platforms like Microsoft or Nintendo or Sony or whatever, I think they don't want to touch gambling with a 10-foot pole most likely. So I think the deal would need to include Sega Sammy sort of splitting up, and I don't know if that's really viable. I mean, they have stake in like resorts and like kind of like parks like that. So I think this just goes to show Sega's going to continue to be a player, much the way I see like where Take-Two I think is going to sit. I don't think that is a company that's getting purchased anytime soon either. And we saw, I think last year Take-Two buying Zynga for like $12.5 billion. And we're seeing, Microsoft obviously talking about ABK and wanting that as mobile being a big push there. And it's not just about King, right? People say, oh, Microsoft, they're saying it's just about King, but what they're saying is it's primarily about mobile. That's not just King, right? Because you got to look at Blizzard having Diablo Immortal mobile, and then the big one, Activision does have Call of Duty mobile, and that is huge. 650 million downloads and growing, like $1 billion in revenue annually on a free-to-play mobile game that gives them reach into so many more territories and so many markets where they don't have penetration on console or PC for Xbox games. That's very attractive to Microsoft. It's not just about King, as big as Candy Crush is. Call of Duty mobile and Diablo mobile and all the other titles they can make mobile, it gives them a way in a big way. Call of Duty cannot be separated from mobile at this point. It's a big part of its value. Moving on from that, Atari acquires more than 100 PC and console titles from the 80s and 90s. So this is kind of a cool news. I don't know. Atari is one of those things you're gonna have to be kind of watching out for now. They got Bubsy, Hardball, Demolition Racer. I mean, a lot of titles like I don't have any personal like connection with, but are kind of like obviously cool retro titles that a lot of people love, who are into like retro games. And I think Atari is kind of positioning themselves there to be the company bringing retro titles to the modern audience, right? We've seen all their like Recharge games coming out. We've seen, with the acquisition of Night Dive Studio, obviously they're working to, that's a studio that's known for doing these sort of like modernizing remakes or remasters of games. So pretty cool to see Atari continuing to kind of push into that and kind of shoulder its way back into the conversation. Obviously when they launched that last console or whatever, it was really just a collector's item and didn't really make any waves, but interesting to see where this is going to go. Then we've got PlayStation over here buying Firewalk Studios. Now, this is a studio that hasn't put out a game yet, but they'd been working with Probably Monsters, I believe is the name of the group that sort of helps new studios kind of get a leg up. It's sort of like a bigger parent company. Well, PlayStation had partnered with them and Firewalk to start working on a multiplayer title. PlayStation has now purchased Firewalk Studios, bringing it in-house. This is not like the Bungie purchase where Bungie stayed sort of separate. This is going to be part of, SIE, PlayStation Studios, just normal, part of the studio for them. They'll be putting out a multiplayer game. Pretty interesting to see what that is. I think this shows Sony's continued focus on kind of growing their own content machine and looking to push into multiplayer, cloud, mobile. These are all things we're starting to see Sony sort of stretch its limb, sort of flex its muscles, trying to get into these spaces where we're seeing others as well. This is just sort of continuing on that path. And then I have, oh, I don't know where it went. One more little news of this is what you might call a human acquisition, if you will. But let's jump in here. Joseph Staten, who left Halo. We talked about it last week. He left Halo. People weren't really sure where he was going to go. You can't really see it the way I've got the camera set up, and I'm not going to move it. So we're just going to go there. I'll read it to you. Don't worry. Joseph Staten has landed where? Netflix. Creative director of the first 3 Halos, brought back recently to kind of help stick the landing on Halo Infinite after its delay. He has now gone to Netflix. He said, in my work life, there's nothing I love more than collaborating with others to build worlds filled with iconic characters, deep mysteries, and endless adventures. So today, I'm thrilled to announce that I've joined Netflix Games as creative director for a brand new AAA multi-platform game and original IP. Let's go, end quote. So yeah, Joseph Staten's a legend, right? I mean, the dude helped like shepherd Halo. I mean, he wrote the Halo 2 campaign, which is widely regarded as like the Halo campaign. He's at Netflix now, and I think that's the bigger story, is that Netflix is doing a brand new AAA multi-platform game, and it's an original IP. That's really interesting. I'm assuming by original IP, it's not, like a licensed game. This is not going to be like a AAA Stranger Things game, I'm assuming. But multi-platform's interesting, so we're probably looking at PC and console. Netflix has currently kept its gaming restricted to mobile, Android, iOS, as well as like doing some of the less intensive games. Like some of their trivia games can be accessed, like Trivia Crack can be accessed just through the app, like on a TV. But most of their more like gamey games, mobile only. And they've been making moves there. I mean, they picked up Oxenfree's studio, and now we're seeing Oxenfree 2 get announced. Looks like it's coming everywhere but Xbox. It's going to be on Steam. It's going to be on PlayStation, Switch, and then obviously the Netflix mobile. So if you're a Netflix subscriber, you can access it. But Netflix has been making interesting moves. Like I said, Terra Nil came out as a Netflix game. You see older titles like Moonlighter. I'm losing my train of thought, but there are others. High Water was one that was like an interesting little like turn-based game that came out, and that ended up being Netflix. Into the Breach was another where they seem to have an eye for quality. They're picking some smaller things, but I think grabbing Joseph Staten and doing a AAA is showing that Netflix is moving into game publishing in a much bigger way, and in my opinion, a more respectable way. Right? They're not saying like, we're making games, you got to come to Netflix, it's cloud only. You're going to pay full price. Google Stadia, right? Like they're moving in, and I think like kind of a similar way to what Amazon is doing, beginning to publish games, letting them come to, PC, console. I mean, Amazon is publishing Tomb Raider, in conjunction with obviously the developer Crystal Dynamics. Yeah. So I mean that's big, right? And we're seeing Amazon work with Bandai Namco to publish a game. They're doing obviously they're looking at a big focus on a lot of MMOs, but I don't think Tomb Raider is going to be an MMO, and so I think you're watching these companies sort of learn how to move in the correct way, how to start putting out content, and I think that's exciting. Amazon, Netflix, whatever, it's cool to see big entertainment players starting to get into games, right? And I think hey, more competition is always good for us little guys. Hopefully, we get cooler and better experiences. That's really like the big news this week that I wanted to touch on. I do want to show off this right here. Unrecord. So, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but this is pretty crazy. This is an Unreal Engine 5. This is just sort of a demonstration of a game. A lot of people were questioning if this was real or not. But the developer behind this put out another video showing the game actually in the engine and showing movement and how you can make some changes to, you could see some like artifacting and, but I mean, this is incredible. I don't know how it's going to play or what the game would feel like, but the mastery of lighting and making it look true to life is pretty incredible. I don't know. The first time I saw this, I was just like, this looks like real life. The more I look at it, I can start to find like the little details where things are sort of sized wrong, or you can like sort of see like that the rubble in the doorway there just looks a little bit off. The movement is close, but like very fast, right? The leg came down very quickly. But yeah, I mean, this just looks incredible. Now, I don't know if we're going to see a ton of games that actually come out and look like this, because once you start adding in, you know, like if this were multiplayer, like I don't know. It's crazy. This is like cutting edge, next gen stuff. Are we going to see this? I don't know. But like, I do think this shows that no matter what, like we're about to see some wild, some really wild leaps in image fidelity, right? And image quality, especially if you see other devs using Unreal Engine 5. This just makes me wonder, how are they going to use Unreal Engine 5, right? What sort of like lighting effects? Where are we going to be in a couple years with games, man? This is just, what a wild video to see this all created in a game engine, all playable. And then here, if you'll watch right here at the end, the guy's gonna like, this is where it looks the most gamey, and you can start to realize like, yeah, right, like, wow, that's all I'll say there. That's that is awesome to me. I mean, really, really cool. And again, like I said, like, is it gonna be some like great game that everyone loves to play, or is it gonna play well? I have no idea. But seeing the engine push the graphics like that, that's exciting, right? Because it just makes you start to wonder, like, what are more established studios, what are other devs, what are they gonna do when they start kind of working in Unreal Engine 5? It makes me wonder, like, studios like the Coalition, what is Gear 6 gonna look like? You know, they're doing it in Unreal Engine 5. They're an amazing studio. They're like wizards with UE5. Or with Unreal Engine like 4. They did the Matrix demo for Unreal Engine 5 that showcased it, and you just start to wonder, like, man, what are these games going to start looking like? Very exciting. So I don't know. That was pretty cool, because that was made by like one guy. That's I thought that was pretty awesome. Kind of last thing I was kind of debating if I wanted to touch on this or not, but I think I will, just because it's a pretty interesting story, and I think it sort of shows how things can get taken out of context pretty quickly, or I don't know. But the story is, you maybe have heard, a games reporter and like kind of infamous insider, Jeff Grubb, had said on his podcast earlier in the week, he mentioned that he'd heard from people inside Xbox that management wasn't happy with how Hi-Fi Rush it did, and that Hi-Fi Rush hadn't made the money it needed to make to be successful. That obviously caused like a shit show. Oh, my dog doesn't like when I say shit show. That obviously caused a shit show on Twitter. People were freaking out over this because Hi-Fi Rush had been a pretty beloved, well-received game critically. And then Aaron Greenberg from Xbox came out and tweeted in response, Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. On top of that, the news is that Tango Gameworks, the studio behind Hi-Fi Rush, is hiring for like 150 more people. They're expanding. They're going to work on more than one project at a time. So like all signs point to it being a success. And then Greenberg basically came out and said, no, by our metrics, it was a hit. So then the backlash kind of flipped back on Grubb, and he sort of walked it back a little bit. Like he walked it back and kind of said, I didn't mean to say it wasn't successful. It didn't make the money, like it cost this much to make, and it didn't make it, made this much, I think was the exact like hand motion and everything he did in this like apology tour video. Where he, in a way, he sort of doubled down on it, just being like, it didn't make money. And I don't know how you can know that. And I'm sure he's way more connected than I am with people in that. But when you look at the backlash and you look at people at Xbox kind of shooting it down and saying, no, it was successful, I think there comes a point where people want it. This puppy's freaking out. Kato. Guys, my dog is going crazy. Bear with me. I let him in here This is the first episode I actually let him in the room, and he does this. Acting a fool. Yeah, episode 8. You're back on the couch, bud. Anyway, yeah, he sort of doubled down on it, right? He's basically saying like, nah, it still didn't make money, is what I'm hearing. And the thing... You know, the thing is, how do you know? Like, Xbox is clearly, with Game Pass, right? They're clearly in a mode of trying to grow users, and also they want to make subscription fee money. So the goal of Game Pass is to keep you subscribed month after month, keep you coming back, keep you hooked in, get you in their pipeline. You know, when you look at Hi-Fi Rush, it's hard to say whether or not it made profit. Yeah, maybe the sales on Steam or the sales on Xbox didn't hit a certain number, but if it retains users in Game Pass, or if it causes people to buy DLC, or if you get a lot of hours out of players, I think that is sort of a metric that gets a little bit, it just gets harder to quantify, right? And say, oh, it was successful based on just money, because that's a very old model, right? Because think about like Netflix. How do you determine if Stranger Things made money? You have to look at like user engagement. Do we see a wave of signups when this comes out? You know, all these sort of things, right? Are we retaining our users? Is it getting watched a bunch? Are people giving it the like? All those things, right? To gauge whether or not it's a successful product as part of what Netflix is offering. And I think we're going to start to see, especially these smaller Game Pass titles, that's going to be part of the metrics they have to look at, is like, what does it do for the ecosystem we're building, right? They're building a monthly active sort of user base that pays a sub fee. So does our user base that pays us this sub fee, do they engage with this content? Does it, after they're done playing Hi-Fi, do they play a different game? Right? Do they turn their Xbox off once they beat that game, or do they start looking at other things? Do they go into the store and buy DLC for Forza because they were playing Hi-Fi? Like, all those little things you have to track, because that's the whole goal of Game Pass, is to get people in Xbox's ecosystem. They're tracking that. They've got to be, right? Like, there's no way they're not looking at like, okay, people play Hi-Fi Rush, and then what do they do? What do they do with their Xbox next? Because if it got them to stay on the sub, that's a win. But also, do they download something else right after? You know what I mean? If they look at it and they go, whoa, 60% of the people who played Hi-Fi Rush, they downloaded a second game from Game Pass. That's a huge win, right? They're trying to keep engagement. They're trying to grow that user base. So I think you got to look at all those things. You can't look at a game that shadow drops and is digital only on Game Pass. You can't look at it and go, well, how much did it make on Steam or on Xbox, like dollar sales? How is that the only way to quantify it when like Game Pass is obviously a big push for them? So I think that's something that's got to be considered. And I think trying to simplify it out is like, how much did it make versus how much did it cost is not going to work for these games anymore. And I do think one way the Grub is not back down from his original statement is on the podcast where he mentioned this. He says Xbox management is not happy. Management is not happy with the direction of these games and what Xbox is doing. And I can believe that, because in 2022, they didn't put out a game. And I don't want to hear about like the Grounded release or Pentiment, because Grounded was coming out of early access and Pentiment was a passion project, a very small passion project that a small team from Obsidian worked on. But really, other than that, I mean, they put out the second party As Dusk Falls, but they didn't put out any tentpole releases in 2022. I can't think of another publisher, not even a platform, not even a console maker, but another big AAA publisher that just missed a whole year. Nothing. Like, so that I can believe that they're probably not happy with the cadence, but it's the craziest thing to me is to say, and it's Hi-Fi Rush they're not happy with. Like, to tie those things together, like the idea that to have that in the same kind of concept, right? That it's Hi-Fi Rush they're not happy with. I don't understand that. Like, Hi-Fi Rush is like the one thing they can lean on from earlier this year, right? Like, it's like it is the pearl amongst a sea of shit right now for them. So yeah, I don't know where he was going with that or what's going on. And when you have Xbox management like Greenberg coming out and saying like, no, it hit every key measurement we had, hit our expectations. We're very pleased with it. So pleased, in fact, that they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're expanding Tango Gameworks. So I think that, yeah. Hi-Fi Rush was a success by every measurement. I don't think the cost versus like its actual sales revenue from like the first month or whatever, or the first couple months, I don't think that's a factor that anyone should be considering when looking at this game or gauging success for games like it coming out of Xbox and hitting Game Pass. Yeah, man, I think it's going to be, like I said, this is going to be a short but sweet one. That's kind of all I've got. Next week, who knows, right? Like once I turn this off, I feel like all the news hits like on Monday. So maybe I'll have more. Who knows? But this is what we got for now this week. I appreciate anybody who checked this out, whether live or on VOD. And yeah, check out the channel. I've got a video dropping on the channel Wednesday. So feel free to check that out. Otherwise, I will see you next Sunday. Thank you again for tuning into this. Always appreciate it. All right, have a good week.